It's very good.
Test 1, 2. Can everyone hear me out there? Great. I got a bit of a cold, so if I start coughing or sneezing, please forgive me. Wow, what a great turnout. Thank you for coming out on such a much needed spring-like day. My name is Bill Urbin, and I'm a photographer, audiovisual coordinator here at the Roosevelt Vanderbilt National Historic Sites. I'm also the coordinator for the Community Photo Workshop. I'd like to welcome you to the Wallace Center on behalf of myself, the National Park Service, and the National Archives. The National Park Service and the National Archives share the Wallace Center. And we have a lot of great programs here. This is also where education programs take place, especially the library education programs. If you want to find out what's going on in this great building, follow our info site, historichighpark.org. A couple of people asked me who Henry Wallace was. And Henry Wallace was FDR's third vice president. Or he was vice president in his third term. And he was before that Secretary of Agriculture. And don't feel too bad about not knowing who Henry Wallace was. When this building was about to be built, I was telling people it was being built in the memory of George Wallace. So that's how much I got there. We've got a very exciting program today. Two really unique gentlemen, both very prolific artists in the realm of photography. One likes to go by the name of X. He's right here. He's going to be our first presenter. And then we have Jeff Montagne here. But before we get started, I got to give you some information and ask you a few questions. If we've got to leave the building, all these doors go out. So we can just go out this way, at the end of the hall here, at the end of the hall by the sign-in table. Restrooms are over by the sign-in table. The way that things will break down today is X will give his presentation, then we'll take a short break, 10 minutes or so, and then we'll have what I call club time, and that's when representatives of local camera clubs and organizations can tell us a little bit about their club. Also, we have Cliff Foley, who's going to be representing a great group, the Hudson Valley Photo Network, and he'll tell you a little bit about some really exciting programs that they've got coming up. Let's see. Okay. For how many people is this the first visit to the Wallace Center? Okay, so quite a few people. How many people is this the first time to a National Park Service Community Photo Workshop? Wow, great, excellent. And I hope you all signed in and got on our mailing address. How many people are in a camera club? A lot of people, great. How many people are not in a camera club? All right, so there's a lot of people that can find out about being in a camera club. Let's see, is it anyone's first visit to the home of Franklin Delano Roosevelt? All right, great. So I got new people. The Roosevelt and Vanderbilt National Historic Site encompasses 3 National Historic Sites, a presidential retreat, the National Archives, administered by the Roosevelt Library and Museum, administered by the National Archives. We have 4 spectacular gardens, miles and miles of trails, and some of the most spectacular vista views on the Hudson River. Just behind us is the Roosevelt Library Museum. It's the first library museum, first presidential library museum, the only presidential library museum used by a seated president while he was in office. Also, FDR helped design that building. Just behind the library is the home of Franklin Delano Roosevelt National Historic Site, the only presidential site where a president was born, raised, and was buried. And he and the First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt, are buried in the Rose Garden, along with 2 of their dogs, Fowler and Chief. 2 miles to the north is the Vanderbilt Mansion National Historic Site. And the Vanderbilt Mansion is the only Gilded Age piece in the National Park Service. It has 54 rooms and 14 bathrooms, which sounds pretty large, but it was known as Uncle Fred's Cottage by the rest of the family. It's the smallest of all the mansions. There are 56 species of trees there. Dr. Hosack, when he owned the property, he planted a lot of those trees, and Dr. Hosack started the botanical gardens in New York. Also, there's the formal garden up there, one of our other gardens, which is very spectacular. And like most of our gardens, maintained by volunteers. Okay, let's see. 2 miles to the east is the Eleanor Roosevelt National Historic Site, Valkill. And Valkill is the place that Eleanor Roosevelt called her home. It's like a sanctuary. It's a great place if you want to go birding or just get back to nature and to learn about the magic of Eleanor Roosevelt. It's really a spectacular place. 2 miles, about a mile east of Valkill is Top Cottage. And Top Cottage is a place it's FDR's retreat. He built it on the highest point on the property, the Roosevelt property. And he said he built it to get away from the mob. And it's up there that he talked to Winston Churchill about using the atomic bomb. It's also the place that the famous 1939 hot dog picnic took place, when the King and Queen of England, and it was King George and Queen Elizabeth, it was the first time British monarchy visited the United States. So we had a big hot dog picnic up there. And this year is the 75th anniversary of that picnic and the visit of the royals to Hyde Park. And if you follow our website, historichydepark.org, there's going to be activities surrounding that event. We're going to have something in the parade, the Park Service is going to have something in the 4th of July parade, and the National Archives and the National Park Service are also going to work together in a couple other activities surrounding that anniversary. Follow historichydepark.org for details on that. There's always something going on here at the sites. One of the programs we offer is the community photo workshops. And it's a great opportunity for us to see the sites through fresh eyes, your eyes. And usually what we have are presenters, like today, and we have field photography strolls. We had a winter solstice sunset photo shoot and a summer solstice sunset photo shoot this year. One at the Vanderbilt for the summer, at the home for the winter. Let's see. Okay, and also, I hope you all got an information sheet when you came in. On that sheet, you'll find instructions on how to get your photographs on our National Park Service website. Also on that sheet, you'll find a pass, and courtesy of our superintendent of Roosevelt Vanderbilt National Historic Sites, Sarah Olson, she's treating you to a free tour of the Roosevelt home. Now, we have 2 tours set aside today for people here if they want to go in. There's one at 1:30 and there's one at 2 o'clock. You'll also notice that that pass allows you to visit free, one visit only, free for a month. So if you can't make it today, because there's a lot going on, you can come back through the month. Also, when you came in, you received a button, your official community photo workshop button. And this button will give you free entrance to the Roosevelt Museum today to see the wonderful new exhibits there, courtesy of Lynn Bassanese, the director of the library. On that button, you'll notice a young man. And that man is FDR, 15-year-old FDR, 1897, with his Poco plate camera. He's visiting his family in Fairhaven, Massachusetts, a family reunion. And this photograph is taken. It's a good chance that he took that photograph because he had a number of cameras and they all had, well, not all of them, but they had timers on them. And there are many photographs over in the library of FDR with Roosevelt dogs and family members, and he took those photographs himself. He was a really accomplished photographer from around the age of 12 to around 21. Really spectacular, and if you ever want to see his photographs, they're right in the library there, and they'll show them to you. If you didn't receive this, your information sheet, or X's outline, Doris, come on up for a second. I'd like to introduce you to my assistant, Doris Mack. She's a volunteer here every Friday and Monday at Valkill. She's the Park Service oldest volunteer, and she doesn't mind me telling how old she is. She just turned 91 this month. We depend heavily on our volunteers, so if you're interested in volunteering, please do. Not only that, she was friends with Eleanor Roosevelt. Her and her husband Theodore at dinner at Valkill. Her husband is mentioned in Eleanor Roosevelt's My Day column. And Doris is a living link to Eleanor Roosevelt and one of our National Park Service treasures. So she has the button, X's outline, and also the information about getting your photographs on our website. So come see her if you need that. Okay, thank you, Doris. Or Monday and Friday, go to Valkill and see her in person. Let me make sure I got everything here. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce a very prolific and talented artist, a photographer, a painter, a musician, filmmaker, and a lawyer. X uses digital photography and social media to breathe new life into iconic American figures and historical events, thereby making them relevant to the 21st century audience. He is an artist in resident at Weir Farm National Historic Site and recently photographed the Sagamore Hill, President Theodore Roosevelt's historic site. His work is on the Sagamore Hill exhibit is at Harvard for a year. I think it's a year, X? Okay. And he'll be telling you a lot more about himself, and there's really too much to tell. You got to go to his website to check it all out. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome X.
Well, I don't want to live to be 91 because that means I have a lot more years left in taking photos. So I guess the secret is to become a volunteer here. So I would encourage that to everybody. Thanks very much, Bill, for the introduction. Thanks very much for coming, too. What a great turnout. You did a great job in promoting this thing. So I really appreciate everybody being here. There's many choices, I'm sure, on where you can spend your day. But you chose to spend it here. So I hope I deliver something that you will come away with feeling it was worth the trip. Just by way of background, so that I can give some context to the presentation I'm going to give called Learning to Look. I just want to tell you a little bit about how I got to where I am. It seems like I'm on this ongoing journey to figure out what I'm going to be when I grow up. When I was growing up, my uncle was an oil painter, very inspired by Van Gogh, did a lot of watercolors. I kind of grew up around that influence. My father made antique chair reproductions like Chippendale and furniture like that. So, it's not art in the pure sense, but it's very artful. Lots of carvings and lots of design work. And so, I worked in his shop and, helped do the planing and the sanding and all that sort of thing as a kid. Kind of hard to believe. I mean, right now they'd probably put my father in jail for doing that because I was working with these big, scary machines, no protection, but that was back in the 70s. And we didn't worry about those things back then, Way back in the 70s, yes. That's why I'm hoping to live till 91. But from there, back in that time, it was not uncommon for, it was a different time. Lots of neighborhood rock bands. So, I grew up in music. And when I was in college, I really kind of focused more on painting. So I took art history courses, did lots of oil painting, pastel, charcoal work, to the point where I thought I wanted to do that full time. I was very passionate about it. But when I graduated college, I kind of focused more on music. Again, just playing with different bands, writing my own music, recording, performing, that sort of thing, arranging music. But as my parents advised me, it's kind of hard to make money being a painter or a musician. So they said, well, get some kind of an education, something you can fall back on, something you can make steady money with. And so their encouragement was to pursue either medicine or law, okay? And I really didn't like the doctor thing. I just didn't like the idea of being around sick people all the time, and blood and that sort of thing. Although my father's side of the family has many doctors. My father's Cuban, so he came over from Cuba. My mother's Puerto Rican. I grew up in Brooklyn. So, they were immigrants. They were looking to see their kids, do something better. And so medicine and law was the thing to go for. I decided to go for law. I just felt it had a lot more flexibility. And I went to New York University School of Law. And after graduating, did the corporate thing, worked at a corporate law firm, which is what many graduates did. And it was good. I mean, the money helped pay off some of the loans, at least make a dent in it anyway. But to be honest with you, it was incredibly boring, you know. And forgive me if there's any corporate lawyers out there. I'm guessing that probably none. But I really thought it was really boring. The work environment was not really what I thought was appropriate. At least back in those days, it was still a little bit kind of Mad Men oriented, you know, very macho, very militaristic. I just didn't fit in. Of course, my hair was not like that back then either, but I still didn't fit in, didn't feel comfortable with it. So I eventually left the corporate law firms and then started my own law practice. And I decided to take a chance with it. I was so displeased with the legal practice that I was willing to walk away from it and just try to find something else to do. But I figured before I do that, let me see if I can have a shot at developing a law practice representing creative people, because those are the people I feel comfortable with. Most of the people I worked with were musicians, because my background at that time was very active in music. So I worked with, you know, people who were established, people who were starting out, people in the middle, mostly musicians, but also worked with actresses and models, filmmakers, people involved in theater, producers, people behind the scenes like managers, that sort of thing. It's hard to mention names because it depends on what kind of music you like, what era you're from, you know, as far as your musical tastes go, but I think most people know who Village People are. Yeah. So I represented those people, Village People. Represented gangster rappers, you know, so I had to make sure that, you know, they're a rough lot, let me put it to you that way. Represented many dancers, worked with some of Madonna's dancers for a while on a video. So worked with a lot of very interesting people. Music industry has gotten very bad over the years because you know, people started downloading music illegally online, and so that kind of decimated the industry. I mean, it's still out there, but it's not like what it used to be. So that affected my ability to earn a living, quite frankly. And right around that same time, then I got diagnosed with cancer. This is about 10 years ago. Fortunately, as you can tell, I survived it. They caught it early enough, or just through surgery, they were able to treat it. And then it was just a process of recovery. But during the recovery process, you know, it gave me time to really reflect and think about what I want to do. Because I wasn't really satisfied with practicing law. Even when I practiced for myself, representing musicians, it's really hard to do. It's hard to develop business. Musicians never have money, and when they do, they are inclined to spend it on other things, like pit bulls and sneakers and really important items like that, instead of my legal bills. So, and then the music thing was frustrating too, because at the time, I was doing shows throughout the Northeast area, just independently, mostly coffee houses, and I had a band. And at one point, we actually did well enough where American Idol, when it was just starting out, they had a website version called American Idol Underground. So it was like a compliment to the show, and it was meant more like for independent artists. And we actually were in the top 40 of American Idol for 1 week. That's all it was, just 1 week. But I was elated by it because it was done through no effort on my part. I simply submitted the song, and somehow it developed some traction. People were listening to it, and they kind of voted for it. It just ended up, I think it was number 37 or 38 or something like that. So all by itself, and I thought that was really interesting. Problem is, when you're in a band, it's a collaborative effort. So there's always somebody. You're all familiar with Spinal Tap, that movie? Okay, you know the thing with the drummer? Okay, that was our issue too. We always had a problem with the drummer, it seemed. It seemed like the drummer could never be relied upon. And you know, I had drummers who, like the night before a show, would say, "Oh, I can't make it tomorrow." You know, so there was lots of violence in the process. Usually, violence I perpetuated on somebody who was just not cooperating and holding us back. And I just got tired of the whole thing. You know, so when I was recovering from the cancer, we took a family trip out to Arches National Park, beautiful park out in Utah. And I really wasn't in the mood to, I just wanted to kind of be myself, I guess, for lack of a better word. I didn't realize at the time, but I can see that now. But what I found really soothing and relaxing and contemplative was just kind of walking off on my own with my camera. It was a little Canon point and shoot, nothing very fancy, and just taking pictures of things that I just thought were very beautiful, and it's a very inspiring landscape. At that point in time, I still was doing music throughout the Northeast, but I was doing it as a solo artist. I got rid of the band. And what I did was I set it up so that when I did a show, I also had some tables set up. And I had like a little exhibit of all the photos that I took out in Arches National Park, as well as some other photos that I had. I figured, all right, this makes it more interesting. It's not just a show. No one else is doing it. And you never know. Maybe somebody will like the pictures. And indeed, to my surprise, people actually liked the photos to the point where they were buying them. And what was good and what was kind of bad was they were buying it. That's good because my profit margin was really good on those photos. What was bad was they weren't buying the CDs as much, and I felt a little bit hurt by that. Like, how dare you not buy the CD too? But it gave me an idea. It said, maybe photography is something to pursue, because it's really important to me to express myself artistically in some way. Okay, if I'm not able to do that, and my wife is here and she will attest to this, I start getting grouchier and crabbier and more annoying than I usually am. And that's not a good thing for society. So I have to express myself, and I just felt like with photography, what was great about it is that there's nobody to hold me back. If I want to stay up all night long or spend my entire weekend to get a project done, I can do it. Nobody's going to stop me. I don't have to rely on anybody else. I can actually finish a project and feel a sense of satisfaction knowing that it's done. Whereas with music, we would just go through rehearsals, somebody would quit, I got to bring somebody back in now, got to retrain them, and then just when they're almost there, then they leave. It was just this treadmill of just not getting anywhere. So then I decided, you know what? I think I am going to pursue photography and give it a shot. I don't have formal training as a photographer, but I have enough of a background in the arts where I felt like maybe I could do something with this. So then I decided to make a clean break from my past. And it's just a psychological thing. I know it's kind of silly, but I decided to assume a new name, a name nobody can pronounce, a name Xiomaro. Xiomaro is, my roots are from Spain, so, my mother and father, they trace back to Spain. My father in particular traces back to the Canary Islands off the coast of Africa. So I wanted a name that had its derivation from Spain, just something that meant something to me. And Xiomaro, actually, what you commonly see is Xiomara, which is a female name. So I just put an O at the end, which makes it masculine. And Xiomaro means ready for battle, which I thought was really interesting. I really like that name. It just kind of harked back to my thing with cancer and also being a lawyer and all that sort of, the violence I did in the band members who didn't cooperate with me. So I thought that was a really good name, Xiomaro. Problem is nobody can pronounce it because of the X, right? The X is pronounced like an S in Spanish. So over the years, it's really kind of funny because it began with Xiomaro, then it became Xio, okay? So there's some people out there like Cliff and all that who know me as Xio, right? But now it's been deconstructed further to just X. You see, just X. And what I think the next stage is just going to be, my name will just be, hey you with the camera. It's just going to be that, right? So you can call me X, that's the name. But that's kind of my background to this. I want to thank some people in the process. Let me see if I can do this correctly. Yeah, I want to thank Bill Urbin. He was the gentleman who opened up today. In fact, a big round of applause for Bill, because it looks easy setting these things up, but there's a lot of detail behind the scenes to do it the right way. And I know he did it the right way by virtue of the fact it's such a great turnout. We were talking about this actually in the summertime, and then I guess it was around December when we really started putting the pieces together. So I really appreciate him doing this. I also want to thank Professor Eleanor Carr from Manhattanville College in Purchase, New York. Eleanor Carr is my first teacher when I was in college. And she had a course called Learning to Look. And that really, no pun intended, really opened up my eyes to how to appreciate art and how to see things a certain way and how to incorporate that in your own work. So what I'm presenting today is not a direct copy of what she did, because hers was specifically just for oil paintings and that sort of thing. I'm kind of extracting those principles and applying it to photography. I also want to thank Linda Cook from Ware Farm National Historic Site. When I started to pursue photography, I floundered for several years, not knowing exactly how to get started in photography. How do I put something together? I really want to do something more artistic as opposed to just purely commercial. And so how do I get exhibits? How do I do it? And it wasn't until maybe a few years later, when through the AAA, I got an email announcing that there's this national park called Weir Farm, National Historic Site in Connecticut. Weir Farm is named after Julian Alden Weir. It was his homestead. And Julian Alden Weir is one of the founders of American Impressionism. His work, you'll find it in the Metropolitan Museum American Wing. You'll find it at the Smithsonian. I mean, he's a pretty big deal artist. He's kind of not in vogue right now. But if you go through the history of art history, you'll see that he's a very key person. So this is his home. His studio is there as well. And the AAA announcement said you might want to go there one weekend because it's a really beautiful place, which it is. And there's really no other park like it because it's the only park in the national park system that's dedicated specifically to painting. So it's Weir Farm National Historic Site. It's in Wilton, Connecticut. So I went there with my wife, and what was really cool was that the ranger that led us on a tour said that we have an artist in residence program, which I'd never heard about. Anybody out there ever heard of an artist in residence program? You're much smarter than me, apparently. I never heard of an artist in residence program. I didn't know what it was. And for those of you who don't know what it is, it's basically a program where as an artist, you can apply to it, submit your work. It gets reviewed by professionals in the art world. And they will select people who they feel have something to contribute artistically. They have to like your work, obviously, and see some credentials. But if you get accepted, they invite you, at least in the case of Weir Farm, to live in the park, rent-free for a month in a historic structure. They don't pay you while you're there, but they provide the utilities and they provide a state-of-the-art studio as well. And you have total artistic freedom to do whatever you want for a month. And then at the end of the month, they'll set you up with a local exhibit. So when I heard that, it's like, I got to do that. I want to do that. Problem was that I didn't think I qualified, quite frankly, because I had nothing credential-wise that would merit me being selected. But as we went to the parking lot to go home, it just kept nagging on me that I can't leave here unless, I get that application. But I was just so embarrassed to ask for the application. So, being a macho Latino, I mustered up all my courage, right? And I turned around and I said to my wife, Rita, you go in there and get the application form. And she did. And then I took, while she was out there, I was in the backseat of the car in a fetal position, kind of shaking, waiting for her to come back. And she brought it back to me. I filled it out, worked on it real hard all summer. And then to my amazement, like 6 months later, they actually accepted me. And to this day, I really think that they just had a slot that they couldn't fill. And they just said, well, let's just let this guy in. Because honestly, I really didn't have the credentials. But I did submit some photos. They were kind of weird. They're very abstract, even though they were landscape pictures. And so there was something there that caught their attention. And that was a turning point, really, for my life. Because from that moment on, when I started working there for that month, it gave me the peace of mind to really focus and think about what it is I want to do. And I started striking up a relationship with these other very passionate park officials at Weir Farm about art. And what eventually did was, and this is actually going somewhere, it's all connected, but what it did was, Weir Farm has these buildings that were being renovated, so they were closed to the public, and they were empty inside. They were empty for the first time in 140 years. They were empty because they had to, redo the wallpaper and, figure out what the original paint was and get it looking like it was during Julian Alden Weir's time so they could open it to the public. So I was like looking through the windows and taking pictures of the exterior, and they can tell that I was very interested genuinely about these buildings. So the grandson of Julian Alden Weir, still alive, he said, would you like to see inside? He went to an open studio I had there and saw the pictures and asked me if I wanted to go in. And I said yes. And so I took some quick snapshots just for myself. Months later, after the residency was over, the park asked me about those photos. And I thought I was maybe in trouble for having taken those pictures. Maybe I was not supposed to do it. But they wanted to use the photos to be able to help promote the park. And they weren't really very good. They were just snapshots. It's kind of dark in there. So a lot of them were kind of blurry and it looked really very good. But they liked my work enough from the residency that they said, well, how about if we commission you formally to do the right job and really take the photos, not just in a documentary way, to document what's there, but to do it in an artistically pleasing way, something that might be just beautiful in and of itself. And it's exactly what I wanted to do and what I wanted to hear. So I had this challenge of taking pictures of empty rooms, right? But that project ended up getting exhibited at Brigham Young University, which has a very big collection of Weir paintings. They ended up actually purchasing about 5 of the photos for their permanent collection. Senator Joe Lieberman, he's retired now, but at the time he was still senator, and he was one of the co-sponsors of the bill to create Weir Farm as a National Historic Site, like 20 years earlier, or whatever it was. He did an exhibit in Washington, D.C. through his office. So that started kind of getting me started there. That ended up kind of circulating through the Park Service. And then, my studio and my home is on Long Island, New York. And so right there you have Sagamore Hill, cousin Theodore, right? Cousin of FDR. And so they also were renovating the house. So they emptied everything out for the first time in who knows how long, because that house is very, very packed full of memorabilia and paintings and furnishings, if you've ever seen it. And so they said, well, this is a historically rare situation. The public's never going to see the house empty like this. So we also want to document that, as you did at Weir Farm, but again, do it not in a clinical way, but do it in a way that's artistic. So those photos are the ones that are on exhibit right now at Harvard for a year. So they're there right now. And also there are a couple of photos, a couple of selections that are on exhibit here in the Wallace Center. You might have missed it when you came in, but they're on easels, so you can check those out later on. And as a matter of fact, one of those photos will be given away later on as a 5x7 print. You'll see in the outline there's a little slip there you can fill out later. We'll collect those and I'll get those going. And then finally, William Floyd. William Floyd is one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. He's from New York. There's also a historic house on Long Island. That's the William Floyd estate. And so through the Sagamore Hill project, that led me to doing the same thing over there. So it kind of like, jumps from one to the other. And that's been exhibited at Franz's Tavern Museum in New York City. There's a couple of other exhibits coming up this year at Long Island Museum. As you can see, I'm pausing. It's gotten to the point where I have to think about what exhibits I have pending. And that's a great problem to have. But I am very grateful for that park, and also Janice Hess. Janice Hess is from the Weir Farm Art Center. They're part of Weir Farm, but they're the ones who actually oversee the Artist in Residence program. So it's amazing how one thing can lead to another. That's a photo that's on exhibit here in the Wallace Center. That's the North Room over at Sagamore Hill. It's not entirely empty. They were still moving some things in the process, but if you ever go there when it's furnished, it looks nothing like that. There's usually flags hanging from the ceiling. You probably can't see it because it's too far away, but there's probably I think there's right over there, there's a moose head. And when you get close enough, you'll see there's a little tag hanging from the antler, because they had a tag because they're on the way of removing it. So it's pretty weird. Hey, Bill, is it okay if I hand hold this thing?
Yeah, yes, sure.
Yeah, okay. It's a little hard to look at people and... Just a second. Excuse me. There we go. This way I can move around. That's better. And that's the one we're going to be giving away as a freebie. This is a shot of what's called Mother's Room. It's actually the master bedroom of Theodore Roosevelt and his wife. And again, just a rare shot where you can get the sun setting like that. They actually let me open the door. When you work in these places, you're literally working in a museum, so you can't touch anything. They're very careful about that. So you have to be real careful when you move in with your tripod. God help me if I pick up the tripod and I smash a stained glass window, right? So it's a little nerve-wracking sometimes working there. But I just thought it was a nice contrast, this prettier, more feminine look. It was named after the mother, obviously, Mother's Room, in comparison to this more manly man cave, It's very dark and very TR-like. But those are a couple of photos that are on exhibit here and at Harvard. Harvard has maybe 18 other ones that are part of a whole narrative that I do. This is a shot of William Floyd's signature. Other than this photo, which is taken from the flyleaf of one of his personal books. The only other place you're going to see that signature is on the Declaration of Independence. So I thought it was just awesome that they brought out this book for me to photograph and get close enough and get a nice shot. And when you see the actual print, it's really great because you can really see, like, you know, the presence of his hand on the paper. It's really hard to appreciate here because it's a little washed out and you don't see all the detail. But in the actual print, you can see the texture of the paper. You can even see the print through. Over here is some print through from the other side of the paper, the printing. So just a great signature. This is also on the property of the William Floyd estate. It is a cemetery area right next to the Floyd family cemetery. And this particular burial ground is believed to be the location where the slaves were buried. So here's an example of a founding father of the country, signer of the Declaration of Independence, who, as was the case with Jefferson and Madison, also had slaves. But we often think of plantations and slaves being a southern thing. Here's a plantation. It was a 4,400 acre plantation with slaves on Long Island. So we had them up here in the north as well. So this is a series. It's on exhibit right now for Black History Month over at African Burial Ground National Monument in New York City. So it's a whole collection of those. So I'm just giving you like a real quick tour of some of the photos that I've taken on the exhibits, and then I'm going to tie it into our presentation. This here is a photo at Weir Farm. It's a photo from the dining room of Julian Alden Weir looking out into his studio, which is right behind there. It's a little kind of wavy and blurry and distorted, and that's not a Photoshop effect or anything like that. That's actually just the distortion of the antique glass. And I just thought it made it look very impressionistic, which is what his painting was about. So that one was purchased by Brigham Young University. So they kind of saw that, what I was trying to do with that. And then let's see, next shot we got here. This is interesting. This is a picture of an empty studio, right? It was really hard to get publicity in articles written about this exhibit because an editor would say to me, well, you know, for the longest time, I've been getting your press releases, and I'm thinking, well, why do I want to write a story about this? I mean, it's just photos of empty rooms, right? But when she finally relented and came to the exhibit and saw the pictures, then she kind of got the idea that there was more to it than that. But this is an empty studio where he painted. And then the next picture is the studio as it is now, looking from the other direction. So I'm standing, yeah, exactly, where these doors are, and I'm looking in now, and as you can see, they have it set up with an easel and a painting. His palette is there, some pigment bottles are over here. There's another little paint box, little sculpture. So it's totally different. It's just nice to have the before and after. Right now, we're in discussions with a publisher to try to see if we can get a book out there that has these before and after photos. So that's pretty much a little quickie tour of some of the photos I've taken. So it's really come a long way from the point and shoot pictures I took over in Arches National Park, but it's interesting how it all connects. One thing that I wanted to start off with this learning to look thing is that I know many of you are photographers. In fact, how many with a show of hands are photographers? Yeah, lots of people, sure. And you don't consider yourself a photographer. You know, you probably take pictures because you probably have one of these, right? Yes, and as a matter of fact, before I forget, because we have such a nice crowd here, and I know none of my friends are going to believe me that this many people came to actually hear me talk. So if everybody can just hold still, and when I say cheese, smile, I'm going to take a picture. This is the camera that I use, by the way, for all those photos I showed you. You know, everything was done through Photoshop and apps on iTunes. No, that's not true at all. So I'm going to take a picture. I'm going to put this up on Twitter, Facebook, you know, all these social media sites. So if you connect with me, you can see how you came out in the picture, okay? So here we go, everybody. Say cheese! Cheese! All right, took a few extra in case anybody blinks. It's always somebody who blinks. Okay, thank you very much for that. Continuing right along. We all want to, I would think, want to improve our photography and try to make it more unique. You know, never before in history than now have we been bombarded with so many images. On Facebook alone, and it's probably more now, but the last time I checked the statistic, I think it was 300 million pictures were uploaded on Facebook daily. As it just Facebook, doesn't include Twitter and websites and everything else that's out there. So I mean, it's just incredible, an astonishing number of images. And what happens is after a while, it kind of seeps into our subconscious. And I think, I mean, I have no way of proving this, but I think that after a while, we start taking pictures that kind of look like what we've already seen, right? So my thought is to try to think of ways to kind of stretch and go beyond that. And I really like this comment from Ansel Adams. He said a photograph is usually looked at. Well, that's pretty obvious, Ansel. But he continues, seldom looked into, right? So he's drawing a distinction between looking at a picture and looking into a picture. And I thought it was a very interesting observation on his part. There's another photographer, I'm not sure if I remember who it is exactly, and I'm going to be paraphrasing, but I believe it's a photographer named Minor White, for any of you who are into photography history. But I believe he said that one should spend at least 20 minutes looking at a photo. That's a lot of time, 20 minutes. I don't think I spend 20 minutes on anything, you know? But I think it goes back to this idea of looking into a picture and really taking it in. And, you know, what does that picture say? What's different about it? How does it speak to us? How does it not speak to us? What do we like about it? What we don't like about it? So I kind of thought back to that course I took called Learning to Look. And what folks in the art world do is there are certain things that they look for in pictures. And it's 5 elements, which I'm going to go through. And by no means suggesting that it's limited to these 5 elements, because there's different ways you can put it together. Also, the elements are interrelated. So, you know, I'm going to talk about them separately because we have to have some way of getting our heads around it. But in truth, they're actually all interrelated. And also, there's other elements. I mean, it depends on how far you want to go with it. But it's just a very simple way to kind of get a handle on looking at an image. And even though it's derived from painting and art in that sense, I think it's very important because when you think about it, photography has a very young history. I mean, it's only been around about 175 years, but I did the math right, that's not a lot of time. Whereas with painted images, we've had that for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. So we have a lot more experience and a lot more, you know, history with those kinds of images. And so I think it's something that we can learn from it. Let's see what I have on my next slide. I don't even know what's coming up next. Oh yeah, light. This is the first element, light. And this is an obvious one. I mean, I think, you know, if you go online and you read about photography, you always hear people saying, photography, it's all about the light, you know? And I don't really accept that, you know? And I'm not trying to be, you know, controversial or anything like that. I think it's a little bit of an overstatement. I understand what they mean by that, though. Because if you think about it, photography, the very word itself means light writing. So it is based on light. That's how photography works. And without light, you know, we can't perceive anything. You know, I mean, even the book of Genesis begins with the earth was null and void, right? It was formless. You couldn't even see it. And then God said, let there be light. And then all of a sudden, there was something there to see and to behold, and creation kind of began. So you have to begin with light. And so that makes sense. But there is a lot more to it. I think when people only focus on light, then you start getting photos that kind of look the same, and it's just a way of thinking. But let me show you what I mean, some examples of how light has been treated by artists over the years. So let me see what the next slide is. Yeah, here's an example of like the way we commonly see light treated. A lot of photos, not all of them, but a lot of photos commercially especially tend to be what we call high-key photos. Everything's very bright, very lit. You want to be able to see everything. This is a photo of an interior, since I shoot lots of interiors, from the current issue of Architectural Digest. So it's a very beautiful picture. You can see everything very well. It's very happy. It's very inviting. But you'll also see it in other things, right? So like the next shot here is the current issue of Cosmopolitan magazine, all right? And again, relatively high key, very bright, very white. You can kind of see everything. And it makes total sense, a fine photo. You know, if you take photos like that, you got it made. But it doesn't always have to be that way either. These are photos you probably take if you've done it yourself, you know, where you bounce. I mean, they didn't do it here, but if you want to approximate that look, you know, you typically would bounce your flash off the ceiling, right? And you kind of get everything very evenly lit, it's very soft, very diffused, very flattering light. That's why they use it on models a lot. But here's a painting by Caravaggio. Okay, I don't know if you're familiar with Caravaggio, but he's a pretty big-time photographer in Italy. Photographer. Painter. Sorry about that. I did that on purpose. I wanted to make sure you're paying attention. Caravaggio. Check this out. Here's a painting. This is Narcissus. He's looking at himself at his reflection, which is right here. And it's pretty dark, is it not? What's really interesting about it is that it's dark, but it has a different impact because it's very dramatic. It looks almost like it could be a theatrical event, you know, it kind of has that look like it's on stage. It's very dramatic, and also it's not distracting at all. If you look back here, total void. You don't see anything. And that's interesting, by the way. Another thing that I see online a lot in these forums is this concern by some photographers about making sure that there are details in the shadow, right? Details in the shadow. And I'm all for details in the shadow, but it need not be a rule either. You can also have no detail in the shadow, which is certainly the case here. I mean, I'm sure if you go to the actual painting, it's not just going to be pure black. There's probably some modeling and, you know, there's a little more depth to it. But the point is, there's no scenery. And what's interesting is this is an outdoor shot, right? Presumably, it's a landscape because he's looking at his reflection in what I'm assuming is a pond or a lake or something like that. And then also you got to think about, well, what time of day is this? Or is it a night? And why would it be out at night? Is it nighttime, but yet there's no moonlight? You know, there's no light at all. Like he's in a cave almost. Maybe he is in a cave. Or maybe he's in a really, 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 really shady area. I don't know. But you see, it doesn't matter. The artist didn't concern himself with that. It was more important that he isolates the subject so that your eye is forced to that, and that pushes the story forward. And certainly in his time, the audience would have known about Narcissus because they were more up on the classics, of the Greek classics, not so much today. But you could do that today. If you wanted to take a picture of something and you wanted to really focus on it, that might be a way to do it. You know, put it into some darkness. I showed you earlier a photo that I took of the slave burial ground. And that was a bright sunny day, but I played with the flash, believe it or not, to kind of give it that much darker effect. So that's just something to consider. Let's look at the next slide. I tried applying that technique. Now, I didn't consciously think about Caravaggio, because at this point in time, a lot of this is just intuitive now, because it's just in me, so I don't think about it, line or light. Here's the element light and Caravaggio, but I kind of like the look of those old master paintings. And so here's a model, you know, guy with a big tattoo there. And I kind of did the same thing. This, of course, is in the studio. But again, I didn't care that it's black back there. You can't see any detail. That's not important to me. What's important to me is him and his tattoo. And it creates a certain drama. Now, I understand it may not be everybody's taste, but, you know, it's not about photographing to everybody's taste. It's photographing about what you want to say. And I kind of like the drama of that, not to mention the angle that he's in. Similar angle. This is Peter Paul Rubens, very dramatic painting of Crucifixion of Christ. And what I think is interesting about here is that this is also considered a low-key painting in the sense that the lighting is darker. It may not be as dramatic or as obvious as that Caravaggio one, but actually, if you squint your eyes a little bit, right, you'll see that a lot of the light is right here on the figure of Christ. And so that was done intentionally. It's almost like if you're in a studio, you know, you can focus your light, or if you're using a remote flash or handheld flash, you can point the light at what your subject is. So it's very subtle, but it makes this very dramatic, and it makes that diagonal really, really strong. But it is kind of low-key lighting. You can see the rippling in the muscles, all the shadows, even some areas here where there's some detail in the shadow, to use that phrase, but it gets a little bit vague. You can barely see this dog. You know, part of it, again, is that it's a washed-out picture, but even if you saw it in person, it's going to be relatively dark in comparison to like the photos I showed earlier. So again, something else to think about in photography. You can be more deliberate about introducing some dark areas. Let's see what's next. Again, here's an example. I just shot this about 2 weeks ago. This is a spoken word artist in Brooklyn. She's releasing a CD with some music, and you know, her music is very dark. You know, lots of not depressing, but you know, very introspective. Lots of you know, yeah, angst. Very good word, angst. That's a very perfect word. You know, lots of that. So I said to her, you know, maybe we should go with something kind of dark. You know, she talks about moonlight and the evening a lot, and so we just went with something very dark, but not totally dark. There's some blue here. Again, it was very different to the print. Now, this is not as dark as the earlier picture I showed with the tattoo, so it's a little bit more lit. But again, it's not this is very different. Let me see if I have it here. I have to go back a lot, but if you compare it with this picture, right, that's very different than this. So it's a way of, you know, trying to do something a little bit different. Line is another element that's really big in, you know, appreciating an image, because line can be rendered in many different ways. Now, this is going to be a hard picture to appreciate here, but this one's at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, so you should definitely go and check it out. I've seen this in high-resolution pictures, and I've seen it at the Met. And this picture is incredible. I mean, it really looks like a photo. The artist's name is Lepage. Lepage, he's a French guy. And when you see this picture, all oil painted, you could see every blade of grass. You could see every, you know, hair. What she's wearing, you can almost touch it. You can really get a sense of the texture. That's how precise it is. So it's just an astonishing rendering of the use of line. It's very photographic. But then you have folks like Claude Monet, right? Very different use of line, right? It's very ethereal, very loose. It was very controversial for its time, to the point where people actually hated it, would walk out of galleries just hating it and railing against it. They thought it was not even a painting. It's like an unfinished picture. This must be a study for the real picture you're going to do, right? But very different feeling than this. It's just a whole different feeling. Now, there's more to it than just a line, obviously. It's this use of color and many other things. But the point is, two painters, very different ways of expressing, you know, the use of line. Here it's not very precise at all. Now, here's a Franz Hals painting. This particular one is not at the Met, but the Met does have many Franz Hals paintings. And I just bring this up because sometimes people think, well, that loose painting style is more of a modern thing. You know, it came up like in the late 1800s, early 1900s. But this is like in the 1600s, if I remember correctly. So it wasn't a modern thing. You know, even older painters, some of them anyway, would work in a very expressive and loose manner. If you look at the eyes on a higher resolution picture, it looks almost like those photos where people blink and you kind of see like a ghost image. So there's a lot of motion in this picture because of the loose brushstrokes. I mean, other artists have done this too, Rembrandt, Velázquez. It wasn't limited to just the ones I'm showing up here. Now contrast this picture with this one. This is by Aang, painting of Napoleon on the throne. And what a difference. I mean, this one also looks very photographic. If you look at anything by Aang, it's spelled I-N-G-R-E, but I've always heard it pronounced Aang, so I don't know. But very photographic. This is actually a close-up. So the painting itself is much larger. You can see the entire throne. But again, you can see every detail. It's just really astonishing. Like around here, it looks like you can just feel it, the furriness of it. This rod, that's not really what they call those things, but whatever that stick is, and he's holding, scepter, yes, what a smart group we got here. The scepter is very metallic looking, so very realistic. So but you know, very different feeling that you come away from it, and that's what's interesting. Now you start going into something that's more immaterial, something that's more subjective, something that's more happening up here. You know, how do you feel about the picture? So these are very different. This also is very earth tony and brownish. Here you have a lot brighter colors. Now, photographers have dealt with this too. I don't know if you're familiar with this photo. It's a very famous one. It's a photo of the Flatiron Building in Manhattan. It was taken by Edward Steichen, okay? And this one, again, a little hard to appreciate here. You have to see the real thing, but it's also a little bit more like an impressionist painting, you know, very loose, very ethereal. Part of it, of course, is that it's a misty day. You know, it looks like it rained. So that's part of it. As you can see, I don't want that. How did that happen? All right, I think I need Clifford's help. Clifford, where are you? All right, well, anyway. That little, yeah, I'm trying to find the right. Oh, wait, I think I hit one of these things. Well, how about if I just press everything until something happens? That's probably not a good idea, is it? Hit enter on the keyboard. Hey, there we go. All right. What smart people. You've helped me out like at least 3 or 4 times today with words I've forgotten. And all right. Hard to believe I work in digital photography. Moving right along, what I was going to say before I screwed the whole thing up was that you could see the silhouette of the guy there with the top hat. And again, there's not much detail there. So Steichen was not concerned about those sorts of things. Didn't obsess over it. For some reason, it won't let me advance. All right, you know what? Let's do this.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, did it? Okay. Yeah, you know what? This thing turned green all of a sudden. You would think green is good. See if I... Okay, there we go. I show this one because that's actually a self-portrait of Steichen along with his sister. And so I didn't want to leave you thinking that if you want to have a different type of line expressing your photography, you have to wait for a rainy or misty day or some bad weather. This was not done, you know, in misty weather at all. That's just the way he took the picture. In fact, this was a very popular style back then in photography called Pictorialism. This was a period of time when photography kind of had an identity crisis. You know, what is photography? Is it a scientific thing? You know, is it for documenting things? Is it an artistic medium? You know, what is it? And so as photographers struggled with that concept, they went to what they knew best, which was painting. In fact, if I remember correctly, I believe Steichen began as an oil painter. So a lot of the photos in that time period had a painterly feel to it. They were intentionally trying to make it look like paintings. And the idea was that if we do this, the public will accept photography as being something that can be artistic, not just something documentary or scientific or something just of the moment. And a lot of times what they would do is they would literally kick the tripod as the shutter is snapping to put it out of focus. How's that, right? You know, we get so hung up sometimes on making sure our latest camera has anti-shake, right? Because we want it to be, you know, pin sharp. But these guys are not worried about that at all. Sometimes they would take the negative and they would also manipulate the negative, or in the printing process, they would scratch in to basically distress the photo to give it these kinds of effects. But again, it gives you a very different type of a feeling for the picture. So I thought that was really interesting that he did this. Here's my attempt at it, okay? Again, I wasn't cognitively thinking about Steichen. I just like to experiment and do things. So this is taken in October, not that long ago, at Cape May Point in New Jersey. And no Photoshop, by the way. Everything was done in camera. All I did in Photoshop was convert it to black and white. But what I basically did was I took my lens and I disconnected it from the camera, right? And then I held it to the camera. Didn't let it click. I just kind of physically held it, you know. So here's the camera, right? Here's the lens, and I just kind of did that. And I just took the picture, which is probably not a good idea because that means that it's open and I'm not in the sand by the beach and there's water and birds and stuff happening, right? That's why you see all those little black things in the picture. Stuff got into the lens, but I don't care. So what I did was, by doing that, there was a light leak that worked out perfectly because it kind of almost creates a halo effect right over that, what's that thing called again? Lighthouse, yes. don't know what's happening to me today. Hard to believe I work in digital photography. So yeah, that lighthouse. And it just created this incredible effect. And even in color, it looks pretty good too. The colors were very muted, different. It looked almost like an older picture from the 70s or 60s, right? But again, you can do things like that. So it's great. You have a camera, it doesn't have anti-shake or anti-vibration. Don't worry about it so much. You don't have a tripod? Don't worry about it so much. You're not sure how to connect the lens to the camera? Don't worry about it so much. Because you can still get a picture. You know? There's no shame in that. I readily admit it. Color. Color is another element to keep in mind. And I kind of touched on it a little while ago. Here's a painting very famous by Vermeer. Very interesting title. It's called The Lady with the Red Hat. That's creative. So, and look at that hat. It's this very intense red. Her lips are also pretty red. And also her garment, very intense blue. And I think it's really interesting that he was not afraid to have these complementary colors so close to each other. You know, red, this really bright red and this blue. But indeed he did it. Even her cheek kind of has some reddishness there too. Also not very focused either, right? It's you can tell it's like a little out of focus. What's interesting is that Vermeer is believed to have used something called a camera oscura. Okay, that's the Italian word for it, very similar to the Spanish. That's why I can pronounce it like that. But camera oscura, and basically, to oversimplify, it'd be like taking this room, you make it totally dark. I mean, you got to make it completely dark, and you put a hole in the wall, right? And then through the laws, magical laws of physics, that hole on the other side of the wall will give you an image of what's out there upside down and reversed. And so what a lot of photographers again, a lot of painters would do is they would put paper there or their canvas or whatever and then trace the image. And then once they had that, they turn it upside down, right side up, and then fill it in. And so they would use it, they were not cheating, but they would just use it as a reference to try to get a better sense of perspective and make the image more accurate. And I think here you can really kind of see that. In fact, there's a fellow named David Hockney, very famous artist. And he wrote a whole book just on this topic alone, if you ever want to check it out on Amazon or something. But here you'll see like here, this is like, looks like it's part of a chair, a carving. But when you're close enough to it, you can see like almost like you can see depth of field basically. You kind of sense that it's out of focus. Same thing here. So there's something very photographic about it, but again, it's not pin sharp. And the colors are very saturated.